We all know the dangers. We all know the potential catastrophe. We've had quite enough of talk about that. 5 years ago, the world came together in Paris to outline what those perils were. And the step forward of getting the nations of the world, not all, but a large number of the nations of the world, to agree on this proposition was huge. And there was a sense of euphoria. But now, although we have now all agreed on the problem, we now have to do something about it. And the time to do that is in the next committee meeting of the International Panel on Climate Change, which will take place in Glasgow. We are the host, together with Italy, who are the co-hosts, and it is now up to us to put before the nations of the world what has to be done. We don't need to emphasize to them or to you that the longer we leave it and not doing things but going on talking about the problems, the worse it's going to get. And in the end, unless we do something, it becomes insoluble. So now is the moment. Now Glasgow becomes extremely important. We are leaders, together with Italy, of that group, and it is up to us to organize the nations of the world to do something about it. That's why it is so encouraging to know that the present government has declared this year the year, not of talking about it, not of alarming people, not of warning, but of action. And it's a huge encouragement to those of us who have been worrying about this problem for a very long time to know that now the government of this country is going to do something in Glasgow at the end of this year. I look forward to it.
Thank you very much, Ian. Good morning, everybody. Well, Prime Minister Conte Giuseppe, Sir David, ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to welcome you all to the launch of what I hope will be a defining year of action for our country and indeed for our planet on tackling climate change, but also on protecting the natural world. Now, when I used to come here the whole time as a kid, as I'm sure all of us have done. There used to be a very curious exhibit on the way in, which unfortunately doesn't seem to be there today. It's been removed, I think, for repairs in Wiltshire or somewhere, and it's a very curious carriage. Does it ring any bells with you? And it looks like the kind of thing that would have carried Madame Bovary around Paris, except it wasn't pulled by horses. This carriage. Can you see the thing in your mind's eye? It's an electric taxi. The world's first, and it was invented by an unsung genius called Walter Bursey in 1897. And Walter Bursey, like many of us in this room, was a total nut for electric vehicles. He built an electric bus that went 4,000 miles. This is in about 1895. He built a series of electric vans, and he built a total of 75 of these taxis. And they were very popular and commodious, velvet-lined, and effective. They could turn on a dime. They obeyed all the TfL strictures. They could mount Savoy Hill, which was the steepest in central London. But the tragedy for Bursey and the tragedy for humanity was that he allowed himself to be daunted in what he was trying to do, because he was in the end defeated by the skeptics and those who thought that his efforts were technologically impossible. First, he was fined for going too fast. His vehicles could get up to 12 miles an hour, and he was fined for going down Parliament Street without a chap in front carrying a red flag, which you had to have in those days. And he did admittedly, as time went on, experience some minor technological issues. The beautiful glass batteries that he had, they weighed only 2 tons, were not always reliable, and the tyres gave way under the strain. And eventually, his electric taxis, so lovely and so convenient, were subject to a growing hostile whispering campaign by those who are wedded to the old technology, the ostlers and the coachmen, and everybody else involved in horse-drawn vehicles. And in the end, and the end came pretty soon for Bursey, he gave up. and he concluded that it was impossible, and he wound up his company and surrendered to the internal combustion engine in 1899. And that was the last electric taxi on the streets of London for more than a century, 110 years, in fact, until a certain visionary mayor decided to launch a campaign in 2008, went to China, and got them. There they are. You can see them all over the streets now, or hybrids anyway. And as you look at that, at Bersey's taxi, it's impossible not to feel the pathos. It's as though humanity came 110 years ago to a fork, or more than that, 120 years ago, to a fork in the road and took the wrong way. And look at what happened in the centuries since Bersey despaired. We had a catastrophic period in which the global addiction to hydrocarbons got totally out of control. We poured so much CO2 into the atmosphere collectively that our entire planet is swaddled in a great tea cozy of the stuff. CO2 levels today are at a level not seen since 3 million years ago, when there were trees on Antarctica. Since Bersey despaired of his electric taxi, the temperature of the planet has gone up by 1 degree. And it is now predicted, unless we take urgent action, to get 3 degrees hotter. And in the hurricanes and the bushfires and the melting of the ice caps and the acidification of the oceans, the evidence is now overwhelming. And it is taking its toll. This phenomenon of global warming is taking its toll on the most vulnerable populations around the planet, which is why the UK has now committed to 11.6 billion in tackling global climate change and in financing climate initiatives around the world. And we know, everybody, fantastic to see so many people here this morning, because I think we all know that as a country, as a society, as a planet, as a species, we must now act. And we in the UK will do everything we can to support our Chinese friends in their biodiversity COP, which is also coming up in the autumn. And I think it's very important there should be a link between the two, because and there should be a clear sharing of the agenda, because we must reverse the appalling loss of habitats and species. It's only by repairing the damage to the natural world and restoring the balance between humanity and nature, which is now so grotesquely out of kilter, that we can address the problems of climate change. And of course, at the same time, we have to deal with our CO2 emissions. And that is why the UK is calling for us to get to net zero as soon as possible, to get for every country to announce credible targets to get there. That's what we want from Glasgow. And that's why we are pledged here in the UK to deliver net zero by 2050. And we're the first major economy to make that commitment. I hope you agree it's the right thing to do. I think it's quite proper that we should. We were the first, after all, to industrialize. Look at the historic emissions of the UK. We have a responsibility to our planet to lead in this way and to do this. And of course, there are people in this country, not necessarily in the Treasury, not anymore, people around the world who may say, of course it's expensive, of course it's difficult, it will require thought, and change and action. And there'll be people who say it's impossible and it can't be done. And my message to all of you this morning is that they are wrong. And if you look at what this country has done since 1990, cutting CO2 by 42%, and at the same time seeing a 73% increase in the GDP of this country. We have done that through sheer determination and technological optimism. In 1990, 70% of the power of this country came from coal. It's now down to 3%, and we want to get it to zero by 2024. And that is because we're able to do that because this country is leading a revolution in renewable energy. And by the way, it's driving our national agenda of uniting and levelling up our country, because it's parts of the north and the northeast of the country in particular that are showing the lead in renewable energy. The world's biggest offshore wind turbines are built beside the Humber. The carbon capture storage is being pioneered on the banks of the Tees. 1 in 5 1 in 5 electric vehicles sold in Europe is built on the banks of where? The Wear. And there you go. And so I say to all those who doubted Walter Bursey, eat your heart out, because his basic idea has triumphed, hasn't it? And the thing that they thought was impossible has actually proved to be the solution. And even the aviation industry is now committed to being carbon neutral by 2050. We are on the verge, I'm assured, within a couple of years of having viable electric passenger aircraft. And we will get there. We will get there. And that is the lesson of that electric taxi that I always used to look at and speculate about mournfully. It's not that Walter Bursey was wrong. He wasn't wrong. He was wrong to doubt himself. And the skeptics are wrong to doubt the Promethean genius of humanity to solve these problems. So we will crack it. And I hope that we can, as a planet and as a community of nations, get to net zero, as I say, within decades. We're going to do it by 2050. We're setting the pace. I hope everybody will come with us. Let's work with Giuseppe, let's work with our Italian friends to make COP26 a great success, a fantastic success for our country and for our planet. And let's make this year the moment when we come together with the courage and the technological ambition to solve man-made climate change and to choose a cleaner and greener future for all our children and grandchildren. Thank you all very much. Thank you.